Yes.
Do you have a question?
I will.
Suggestion.
Okay.
Are you aware of that stuff you just put in your face? A lot of it is.
Alive.
Water.
What was that?
Eye drops.
Oh,
Oh.
That was on health, public service anyway.
Okay.
So.
the more you know. Um,
Just watch it out for you.
hi, folks. How are you?
All right.
Welcome back to Government Operations and Military Affairs. It is Friday. Hey, what do we got? The 16th? And we are, for the next few minutes, taking a look at a survey.
Okay.
Taking a look at it. So after the public hearing that we had with veterans a couple of weeks ago, some folks, Speaker's Office and some of the other committee members, both GovOps and House, felt like it was a good idea to send a survey out to listservs and listservs of organizations that we worked with and the folks who showed up and offered their contact information to us. And the Speaker's Office asked us to take a look at the survey and offer any feedback before we sent that out to the organizations. So I know members had a couple of minutes to take a look at things, and it looks like Representative Hooper of Burlington is chomping at the bit for comment.
What?
Exactly.
I think that the first question, we break out veterans as opposed to retirees. The answer is health center.
Well, that was
Could be very different based on that experience.
I'm sorry, the answer to the
the first question, the
question,
breakdown.
which is, what are the most pressing issues?
No,
Oh.
Are
the
you?
very first.
Are you?
Oh,
Are you a veteran? Are you retired?
yeah,
So to break it up into two questions is what you're saying. One that is relevant to a current or former service member, and then the other one that is current, is more relevant to family. I'm understanding that correctly?
yeah, the continuing needs of, I mean, you're looking at a different age bracket when people are not retired. You're looking at the people that are kind of set economically as opposed to not. The subsequent questions where you're asking what people need could be vastly different.
so are you
Revenue.
suggesting that the veteran category be broken into two different categories? Like, did you serve, for instance, less than 10 years, or did you serve greater than that?
Or
Because a veteran is anybody, whether you're retired or not. That's the broad.
Yeah.
And then not entirely even
Definition.
true then.
And then a veteran also is somebody who served one day.
But again, not entirely true.
What's
I'll
not,
explain.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting dynamic. If you serve in the active duty armed forces, you got out after one hitch, call it 4 years, 6 years, whatever, you are a veteran. If you served a 4-year or 6-year hitch in the Guard, they don't consider you a veteran.
why?
Well,
It's
maybe.
the way federal law is right now. They don't until you retire. If you do retire, it's
I think
really
Guard-
weird.
Okay, we will need to hear.
However, I will say this, that there was,
That
That
just
was
made
as
another
of-
piece of things make more sense.
that
Okay,
was
please.
as of the last I knew. That doesn't mean it hasn't changed. Would you concur with that, DL?
yeah, because if a guard member doesn't deploy
Get activated.
to a combat zone, if
Correct.
you get activated
Then you are.
under Title 10,
Thank you for that.
then you're,
That hits the
then you
designation.
become,
Yeah,
But it's entirely possible to be a guardsman and never deploy.
correct. So you could do 19 and a half years, retire,
Yeah,
and you
veteran.
do not hit the veteran status. Whereas if you hit the 20 without a deployment, you hit the veteran status.
Correct.
But a deployment at 2.5 years will
No,
designate
veteran.
you the veteran status.
The key is to tap Title 10. And when you go active, you become a Title 10 soldier,
Once it's a-
airman, or sailor. When you are a guardsman, you're a Title 32 soldier, airman, or or airmen.
Is this
Oh,
all,
that just really,
if
that
you
just connected
only
so many
ever
pieces.
served in the Guard, but never served in any
I
other
just learned
active
so much as a
duty
military brat.
military
Yes,
branch?
or a vet just said, if you could go all the way to 19 and a half years and
With no Title 10 deployment.
no Title 10 deployment.
And that doesn't count anything locally with like, say, like just doing a road washout or something like that. None of that counts.
That's not Title 10, that's state act,
Executive.
that's state active duty, that's completely
Yeah.
different.
It has some.
We ran into a bunch of this stuff in the aftermath of Irene,
Yes.
if I recall.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately something that needs to be corrected, in my opinion, federally. And it may be, and I don't know it, I'd have to go back and look, you'd have to look up, you'd have to have somebody like with a Tucker brain go look and rip the statutes apart.
Damn.
And
Is that me? But yes.
It's access to benefits too.
Yeah. I,
yeah, however, on the VA side of things, I've not
This is
seen them
informal. Yeah.
deny anybody. Well,
I have,
you have,
I have,
but
constituent that served in the Guard or reserves, but never deployed during Vietnam and is not considered a veteran, even though he was serving in the
so same
reserve.
thing,
Hey, I,
He was Title 32 the entire
and they won't
time,
let him touch the VA.
and he's not a veteran. They don't consider him.
Activated.
yeah,
too.
no,
Was
I
he
just need to
inside?
understand what you're asking.
Oh, stateside. Oh, okay.
Never-
Okay.
never-
Okay.
We
never
are
touched
gonna
foreign
have to
soil.
raise hands.
Okay.
You get those Title 10 orders.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay, hands.
Am I,
Try this once. Falls apart.
I,
Bob.
My request is simply, are you a veteran? Are you retired?
Mhm.
I don't
but a
care.
retiree indicates to most people that 20-year. No, I'm just, what I was gonna say when I raised my hand is that this survey is gonna go out to all Vermonters. And who under this, who has served 1 day or 50 years would not consider themselves a veteran? If they're answering this, they're not active, they're not a family member of somebody that's active, they're not simply a concerned Vermonter, they are a veteran. I think what you're saying is probably quite accurate, but I think it's making it too prescriptive. We're just looking for people who have served in the military. So should we say, have you ever served in the military? Because that was the question that was on the Ask the Question bill that we took up recently in like 5 years ago.
I agree, and then you could just have a sub question that says, if so.
Did you retire?
Mhm.
Period. With no mention of the word veteran.
She's got it.
Retire.
Or do you ask what you?
Retire when you have not reached years of service.
No.
You're still
You're not
active.
retired.
I would just put, you could just put in parentheses.
Veteran
20 plus
status?
years, 20 plus years.
Or like, what's your status? Like, what's your designation?
Mhm.
Or just put in parentheses,
No.
plus 20 years behind
Right.
the thing that Lisa's put.
Rep is no.
Are you concerned that some people, it's because they're not a retired veteran, they don't consider themselves a veteran? Is that what our concern is?
No,
No.
no, you missed it. We're,
A lot
Their
of-
concerns are different
Right,
because.
but because a lot of people, like BL said, not in this conversation, but a lot of veterans and a lot of service members who have served don't consider themselves veterans because they didn't retire.
There.
some people, yeah.
That's a misnomer for
Yes.
sure.
That's,
Right, they don't consider, I served 4 years, but I'm not that, what do you mean they don't consider themselves? So that's why I was wondering.
That's my grandpa got the right.
So
That's your
should,
voice.
what was that language that have you ever served in the military?
Does that work?
If so,
Mhm.
Like if you get stopped for speeding, have you ever served in the military?
Reps down.
Sorry, Pandora's box, but this was brought up by a few veterans, was the dishonorably discharged thing.
Mm,
And I hate to open that up, but that I don't even know how you would word that, but that's been brought up by more.
Discharge status?
I don't think
Yeah.
we need to
Yeah.
know that for these purposes. The speaker doesn't want to know, and that's why they deliberately left that language out of S51 when they passed it out of Ways and Means. They did not specify that to get the veterans tax credit, that you had to be honorably discharged. They specifically left that out.
Yeah.
So people didn't have to prove
Like 7 different.
that they were.
Other than,
With that, how would we, if we would like to at all, like to recommend amending or modifying the first question?
I think these gentlemen would like to
Okay.
amend it.
The hands went Waters, Evans, then Stone.
What are we trying to figure out?
This first question. It's a,
Yes, I know that we're looking at the first question, but I'm saying like the wording, sorry, yeah, just wording wise, are we trying to figure out? We're trying to get everybody who's doing the survey to tell us what they are, right?
oh yeah, I mean, this is, we're just trying to grab some information, public feedback to like keep like working on what we started.
Right, so would being more specific give us information that we need, or are we just curious?
I can ask
Rep stuff.
my first thing, I think, but it's, if I'm hearing what you said, is that veterans and retired, veterans face different issues, and what you were saying is that oftentimes that's due to length of service, which is tied to the benefits that they receive, so it's kind of just getting a little bit more granular to know, as if somebody who's not you is talking about access to healthcare, it makes more sense because they don't have the same access to benefits because they are not Mike Morgan, who served 400 years in the Air Force, or
Listen,
basically the same.
Okay, so it's important to have that designation.
Right, because that's gonna be different if he's complaining about access to healthcare versus somebody who served 5 years and did a tour in Iraq, came back and can't find,
It won't be confusing.
Financial Lincoln.
right,
Yeah.
I clued on the housing. The retired, I didn't have the same problem with housing. Can't find a 5-bedroom house as opposed to somebody who 5 years is out of the streets because they don't have any benefits or anything all that.
and the lifetime like TRICARE too,
Yeah.
healthcare.
Yeah.
He's gonna get it, but somebody who was there 5 years is not.
So if you're filling out this survey, then you're not confused about the difference between being a retiree and being a retired veteran,
So
so being a veteran,
So
right?
my comment was saying, Representative Pingo could repeat, so it's kind of like a drop down, I think would help. Cause they're, all of them are gonna say veteran, like, they're all on check veteran. But then what you were saying, it sounds like is like a sub check mark underneath that differentiates to say, are you like a Mike Morgan or not? And if you're not, you don't check it. That's where the 20+ years, just so it helps us know like, oh, it's, they have lifetime TRICARE, they have a pension, they have blah, blah, blah. Or they don't, and maybe that's why they're complaining about there's no access to healthcare in the state of Vermont.
So simply answering that question gives a lot of information.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
So I'm with you on that because that's what I hear is there is a big differentiation, especially in the healthcare world, as somebody who fights with insurance companies a lot, when I'm at UD Medical Center, is that there's a big difference between
Okay,
when you serve 20 years and 5.
Okay.
so Bob, did you have anything else to add there? Because I had you next with a hand, then I had Lisa, then I had Sandy.
No, we agree.
Okay,
I think we're good.
It's just once you go through that window, then your needs are different.
Mhm.
Okay, so my question is to you all who have served. If the drop down question is, are you also a retiree? Would people, general population, understand what that refers to, that it refers to
Yeah.
20 years of service?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so even if you're a family member or whatever, you'd understand that
Yeah, you know,
if you were helping a veteran fill it out.
people, I mean, just because what Mary Catherine said, because you're gonna get different benefits de facto.
Yeah.
Like I have tried to,
Absolutely.
that's a huge benefit.
And one of the big things we heard was that TRICARE doesn't
Okay,
isn't widely available to people.
Yeah, it is.
so Sandy, and then let's discuss structurally if we want to make a change.
Okay, so suggestion, where it says a veteran, you could have a little line, a little space over, it could say 0 to 5, 6 to 10, or 6 to 15, or 6 to 20, and then 20 plus, and I could just put a check mark.
Right.
Or the other thing is where you have branch of service, you could, right below that, so before you did the branch of service, you could say, how many years did you serve? And then have the check boxes. Like instead of having a drop down on the next box, instead of having, where you have branch of service, have another box that says how many years of service do you. How many
So
years of
leave the
service.
first field with the RU as is, and then within the, gotcha. And then within the branch of service, when you answer branch X, and then it would be like a series of years served, ending with 20 plus.
20 plus tells you that they retired.
No, I got you. I just wanted to make sure I was unpacking.
What?
Okay, cool.
You have to serve 20 to get retirement.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, unless you are like medically
Medically
retired
retired.
Right.
early, then you're, like I say, at 15 and a half years, you had a horrific accident, they retired you medically, you would qualify as a retiree.
Do one thing well.
We're probably making a bigger deal out of it than we need to.
Sure. Rep Hango.
For the sake of, the person who's collating these surveys, I think the drop down would be much easier because it's a checkbox instead of having to look at everybody's
I agree.
response. This is how many years they served and then put them in different categories. So
So the
I
drop down's gonna have what?
was gonna just say, are you a retiree? So if you check you're a veteran,
Okay, is everybody taking notes?
yes, I am. Yes, you check that, and then if you check that, there's gonna be a drop down and it'll say, are you a retiree? And you either check that or you don't check it. And then you go on to branch of service and then town of residence. And if you don't check that veteran, you're checking active service member because you haven't stopped serving, or you're a military family member, or you're a concerned Vermonter or other.
Where years of service are irrelevant.
Right, so I think just for simplicity's sake,
Yeah.
for them collating the survey.
It's not really fair how many years they served.
No, only if
Just
you're
wanna
trying to
know if they're
figure out
retired or
if they're retired or not.
Cause that would, sorry,
Mhm.
that would also capture those, the asterisk categories of like the people who get early retirement because of disability status. Cause they would click it.
Okay,
They may have only served for 1 year, but they could get that special. So that would cover
Yeah.
it, I think.
so that we got a good sort of like sense of how to edit that portion. And then obviously kind of residents, whatever. And then do we have the issue buckets here? Is there anything anyone would like to add to that list?
Thought that actually covered that.
Yeah. That's a list that we had framed out early on in this process, with the things we wanted to focus on. Rep Nugent has a hand.
I have two actually.
Yeah, Friday jokes. Friday jokes. Senator, how are you? Good. We'll be with you in just one moment. All right. Can I interest you in a coffee or a snack?
I'm all set.
Okay.
We're actually discussing a survey that we had talked about at the public hearing that we were gonna send out. So the
Yeah.
speaker's office has developed a survey and
Okay.
asked us to
So-
comment on it.
This is very relevant subject matter. But I do see, council is here now as well, so I want to be respectful of everyone.
Yeah, we'll go.
One
quickly.
thing that comes to mind for issues that might be facing veterans is education. Higher education,
Okay,
and I thought it's CCD though.
Okay.
like, do you have trouble accessing higher education or do you feel that higher education is available to you?
Yeah, I think
Access
available,
to,
yeah.
or say
Access
access
to,
to,
A
okay.
whole bunch of things that get in the way of that, I think.
Okay.
because I have heard about red tape with some people.
Okay,
What's it?
Sorry, one chatter background noise here.
All right.
access to higher education as another issue.
Healthcare challenges. Anything to add there?
No, I think that's good.
And next up is the question about families and service members for support, and that's just open-ended for.
I don't care, it's easy, right?
Don't start. All right, the Veterans Fund question is pretty straightforward. And we have the what services or programs make you more likely to stay in Vermont after service? Anything to add to that punch list? Yes, Rep. Reed.
Transportation, I didn't see that in here.
That's fair.
Other,
That's a fair addition. And then the following three are obviously open-ended questions for their own personal feedback.
It's good.
And I have one last comment.
Please.
I did text General Knight about your, what is a veteran question? And the answer I got was that the last that he knew in, conversation with Bob Burke at the Vermont Veterans Association, Vermont aligns with the federal definition. A veteran has to have served on Title 10 active duty for, and he believes the duration is 180 days or more.
On the active duty roster.
Yeah.
Okay. Rep. Nugent.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Demographics, I don't know if that was discussed in the creation of this. Do we want to know like how old people are? Like, they live?
it's consecutive.
That's never really been part of the focus and like,
It's noted as consecutive.
they have a lot of that information anyway. I think that exists. This is more about the feedback on the points of contact.
Yep.
Like, well,
You think that's right? I never.
not to dismiss, but I think.
No, yeah. Actually, it was sometimes it's helpful, sometimes not. I haven't been involved in it because of surveys, so.
And also with demographics, we're gonna know whether they're rural or urban for Vermont by their town residents.
Okay, any further quick comment on that one before we shift gears to the work on H1? Going once. Going twice. Going thrice. Moving on to H1. All right. Senator, how are you?
Thank you. Shall I join you with the?
Please. Would like nothing more.
So with apologies due for a lot of you who have already digested a lot of what this bill has to do, we did present a strike all amendment to send back. It did pass third reading today, so it'll be on your calendar at some point next week. So when I did my floor report in the Senate, I asked the senators to remember 2 points with this: constitutionality and funding. Those are the two issues to me that center around this bill. So House Bill 1's a follow-up to the ethics bill that the General Assembly passed last year near the end of the biennium. And that bill, which was H 875, expanded the powers and duties of the State Ethics Commission. And for members who served last year, you'll probably recall that a lot of the focus on that bill's provisions related to municipal ethics. This bill does not change any of that. But what was also included in the bill were provisions relating to the authority of the State Ethics Commission when it refers complaints to either of the legislative chambers. And we each have our own ethics panel, as you're well aware. Also the judicial branch, and they have two separate boards that have disciplinary control over their officers and attorneys, and then, of course, the executive branch. So it wasn't until after adjournment of the 2024 session, after the bill was actually enacted into law, that constitutional issues were raised in some of these provisions. Specifically, the language in the 24 bill would require the state or the Senate Ethics Panel, House Ethics Panel, Judicial Conduct Board, Professional Responsibility Board, which regulates attorneys, to consult in writing with the Ethics Commission on any complaint that the commission referred to them regarding the application of the state code of ethics to the complainant. And here's the important piece, prior to any of those entities being able to make a determination on the complaint, which meant either they could close the complaint without further investigation or issue findings. But the whole thing pivots on that prior consultation piece. And that is an issue because by the Vermont Constitution, each legislative chamber has the exclusive authority. No one can come before that to judge its members' own qualifications. Similarly, the Vermont Supreme Court has, quote, disciplinary authority concerning all judicial officers and attorneys at law in the state. And those legislative panels and judicial boards were created to help carry out those constitutional functions. So the language of the statute attempted to control constitutional powers of the legislature and judicial branches. And again, I'll just say this twice for effect, statute cannot control the Constitution. A law passed by the General Assembly cannot control the Constitution. So you folks over here did a great job, by the way, in sending H1 over. I'm not going to go through necessarily all the provisions that were in your version. It did alleviate concerns about the statute attempting to control constitutional authority. But the Senate Government Operations Committee also determined that the required consultation with the executive branch was also unnecessary. Not necessarily unconstitutional, but unnecessary. Thus, H1, as proposed by my committee, would require the Ethics Commission to provide its advice on the application of the state code of ethics when it refers to complaint to the legislative, judicial, or executive branch. Again, there's nothing that prohibits either of the legislative ethics panels or the professional conduct board or the professional responsibility board, judicial conduct or the other, from asking the Vermont Ethics Commission what they think, but it can't require them beforehand to consult. And that's the crux of the issue for us. So Section 1 amends the consultation requirement. First, in subsection B, it strikes a reference to a section 1223A that does not exist. It also strikes the authority of the commission to refer complaints to itself for enforcement. This is just a delay till 2027. And I'll explain that as we get a little bit further. This won't take much longer. The authority would be reinstated under section 2 of this bill. Next are changes in section 1223, subsection C and subdivision 1. It's the language applicable to referral of complaints by the commission. It replaces the requirement that the legislative, executive, and judicial branches consult with the commission after the commission refers a complaint to a branch. Again, nothing to prevent them from saying, hey, we've got your complaint. You've raised certain potential issues. What do you think should happen? That kind of thing. That can happen. It still can. It's just that they cannot be required to do that before they take it up. Section 2 is Title 3, 1223, effective September 1st, 2027. It reflects that the commission may refer a complaint to itself for review and potential enforcement when the commission's enforcement authority will become effective again in 2027. There's all kinds of confidentiality of records, which was a part of both of your original bill and ours. And since there are no more consultations required, there's no consultation records. And the records of advice, as opposed to prior consultation, provided by the commission shall be confidential as proposed by the Government Operations Committees under Section 1. And then the other issue for our consideration was the funding involved. And I know that we heard from Christina Sivert, who I'm sure you also took testimony from, and she did go into the Appropriations Committee in the Senate and ask for, I believe it was 2 positions. I'm sure Attorney O'Grady can set me straight if I'm not correct. One of them was an attorney. Right now, they don't have an attorney on staff. She is not an attorney at law in Vermont. So in order to interpret law, one hopes that you'd have an attorney doing that and not like me, who's not an attorney. So the funding request on the Senate appropriation side, we simply don't have the funding. And so Remember when I started, I said constitutionality, and I think I've explained that pretty clearly. And the funding was the other issue. If they don't have any funding to do anything like hiring people, it doesn't really make any sense for them to be able to do the consultations that they wanted to do. They have certain enforcement powers, which they'll get back in 27 as well. And so we put it off for 2 years to maybe allow everybody to just take a deep breath and focus on moving forward. So we had, and I'm sure you guys did as well, some witnesses that were just amazing to me. Sometimes people pay money to have people like Betsy Ann Rass, the clerk, John Bloomer, the Secretary of the Senate. And then we had Carolyn Anderson, the Chair of Professional Responsibility. We also had, to be fair, two differing interpretations of what they said. So we had Paul Gillies, who's a well-respected attorney, and Peter Teachout, who's a professor of law and also very well-respected. They did not agree. It was a little bit awkward because, if I'm remembering correctly, Betsy Ann took courses from Peter Teachout. He was her professor, and she disagrees with his position on this. So it went out of my committee 4-1. And as I mentioned, it did pass second reading and today third reading. So it will come back to you for your consideration. We're hoping that you will concur with us. Really, the only piece I think that we've added is the executive branch's part of this. And there you go. Be happy to answer any questions.
How was the vote on the floor? It was voice vote, if I recall, correct?
Yes, it was. I did have two questions, one by the pro tem and one by the chair of the Appropriations Committee. And I think I answered them adequately.
I was in the gallery, actually.
Okay, yeah. Senator Bruce wanted to know kind of the process involved here. And again, the Ethics Commission can refer any complaint they choose to either of the two legislative panels or the two entities that control the lawyers, but doesn't require them ahead of time to seek consultation.
I just want to think back to when Betsy Ann was in here testifying. She was so extremely professional and waving that Constitution at us and telling, I mean, she had my yes vote as soon as to me. I just think there's no question where I stand on this, and she just did a phenomenal job. And yeah, she was adamant that the legislation has its own power, so.
Yeah, I wasn't kidding when I said, I mean, people pay a lot of money to be in a class and get taught constitutional law from both sides. It was really enlightening to me. And I can't.
Yeah.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Attorney O'Grady, who also had the same opinion as Bloomer and Rask. So.
Anything else for Senator Callamore?
Oh, come on, you can't let me off this easy.
It sounds like you already had it, you know, with the chair of appropriations. And
Yeah.
motions.
Well, thank you, sir.
Sure.
We'll let you know if we got anything else for you on this one, but I want to say, at least for me, on behalf of the committee, thank you so much for the time, energy, and bandwidth that you committed to this.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. All
right, that's it. Last call on Callamore.
Have a great weekend.
You too, sir.
Okay.
Mr. O'Grady.
Sure.
I don't know what to add to that.
I know, right? I was thinking the same thing while he was doing that. I'm like, he's not leaving much meat on the bone for you.
I can walk you through the components of the bill if you would like.
I would like to do that because if it's going to be coming over to us early, I want people to be comfortable because I would like to have an understanding of where the committee is at with taking a position on the amended language.
Autumn indicated that you don't necessarily like to share a screen, and that's
Oh, it doesn't matter to me. I'm a screen share jump ball. If that works for you to do it.
so you should have each one as passed by the Senate, proposed by the Senate, I should say.
Yeah, 1.1.
Yep, 1.1.
What committee report is supposed to be, because the official as passed by the Senate version has released yet, but they're.
Okay. If this is what they passed out and this is what you'll see in the formal proposal. You will see there's the section 1, which is the amendment to the section related to the commission referring complaints. As the chair Collmore just pointed out, there is a incorrect cross-reference to a section that does not exist on page 1, line 19. There is a striking of the ability for the commission to refer complaints to itself because that is about enforcement. And as the Chair Collmore noted, they're going to delay authority for enforcement for 2 years. So this isn't permanently striking the ability of the commission to refer a complaint to itself. It's just delaying it till September of 2027. On page 2 in sub C on line 15, this is where in your version of the bill, you had tried to differentiate between referrals to the executive branch and referrals to the legislative and judicial branch, where the executive branch would still be required to engage in that consultation with the State Ethics Commission after a referral of a complaint. But the legislature and the judicial branch would only have to receive the referral and the recommendation from the State Ethics Commission. There was testimony from Jay Johnson that she wanted the executive branch to be treated the same. There was testimony that if the recommendation is going to include the same thing as the consultation, why do you have to wait for the consultation? So the Senate committee chose to treat all 3 branches the same. When there is a referral from the State Ethics Commission to any of the branches, the commission provides its recommendation upon the referral. There is no longer a required consultation or time period or limitation on action prior to consultation. That has all been removed, and you can see the removal of that language on page 3, lines 3 through 6. In addition, there was a question that came up about when there was consultation. There was language in the bill, the act from last year, that would have indicated that the consultation records would have been public, which raised some concerns specifically from Betsy Ann and Secretary Bloomer, in that if you are encouraged, if not required, to consult with the commission on what to do, you might be engaging in information or discussing information that is highly sensitive, if not confidential. And those records should not categorically be public. So because you don't have consultation anymore, as Chair Collmore noted, you don't need to have these consultation records to be available to the public. But there was a desire to be clear that any advice the commission provides to the referred entity shall be confidential and non-binding. And you'll see that language on page 3, lines 7 and 8. Section 2 is what happens in 2027 when the enforcement provisions come back to life. As the chair noted, there is no money in the appropriations bill for staff or other enforcement at the commission. I think the commission said that they did have money available to them to do some independent law firm investigation. But having staffed the House panel and having hired law firms to do independent investigations, it's like $20,000 to $30,000 an investigation, and they wouldn't have been able to do many investigations. And so in order to not put pressure on that financial resource, the 2 years was added until September of 2027. Then you'll see in section 3, we already talked about the confidentiality of those consultation records. On page 5, you will see because there are no consultation records, that language can be struck. Section 4 is just pushing out 2 years, the effective dates for enforcement that you had for the commission last year in Act 171. I won't step through all of those changes. It's effectively a 2-year change unless it's non-enforcement related. The authority that the commission may have that you gave them last year that's non-enforcement related remains effective now. And then you get the effective dates, page 6, line 5, section 5. The commission procedure for accepting and referring complaints takes effect September 1, 2025, when it was supposed to take effect under Act 171. And to be clear, you are going to supersede those provisions of Act 171 that may have conflicted with this bill. This bill will control over Act 171 if there is any conflict or dispute between the languages. The future version of the effective and enforcement for the commission is September 1, 2027. And that's really it.
Questions for council?
No, seems straightforward.
So coming back over without taking possession of the bill, the process would be us to take a straw poll to concur. Rep. Morgan is the shepherd of the bill, so he has a grasp of what these changes were to speak to it on the floor. Is the sense of the committee right now to concur? Are we comfortable concurring now, or do we want to think about it over that's a lot of thumbs going on. I'm comfortable with the concurrence. Yes. Mr. Coffin?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that. I was in the blind side of the big bottle. Yeah. Stanley was blocking your thumb. Okay, so we have a concur with the Senate proposal of amendment with a straw poll of 902.
I don't need to make a record.
No, that is just for something to be known, verbalized by Mr. Morgan, Representative Colonel.
I think I can remember that.
Okay, 902.
I've got it in my.
Yes, I got my notes too.
In case I will yield to the member from Berkshire to give me that number.
Happy to provide it.
Otto,